I'd like to read to you from chapter 6 of Demelza. I read it today and I thought it was lovely, so I'll read some of it now. It's about when Demelza went to find Captain Blamey in Falmouth. As he disappeared over the hill, Demelza turned and went indoors. All the day was before her now, all today and part of tomorrow if necessary, but Julia put a shorter time limit on her actions. If she was fed at 7, she would do well enough with some sugar and water at noon, which Prudy could give her, and then she would last out till 5. 10 hours. There was much to do in that time. Judd! Ace, are you ready? Well, pick me liver. I only seen Mr. Ross out the house 2 minutes. We've precious little time to waste. If I'm not back before 5, little Julia will be crying out and me perhaps miles away. A dang misthought notion from last to first, said Judd, putting his bald fringed head round the door. There's them as say I'd no leave to lend myself to such fancy skims. 'Tain't sensible, 'tain't right, tain't human. 'Tain't for you to argue all morning, said Prudy, appearing behind him. If she say go, go and be gone. If there's a dido with Mr. Ross, that's for she to suffer. I ain't so certain, said Judd. I don't know, not I. There's no saying with women folk how they'll jump when the screw's on 'em. Cuzzle as a cartload of monkeys. Well, I'm warning ye. If I take this fault for this, may I be hanged for a fool. He went off grumbling to get his best coat. They left soon after 7 and picked up the horse and pony at Trenwith House. Demelza had dressed herself carefully today in her new close-fitting blue riding habit, cut after a masculine style, with a pale blue bodice to give it a touch of something different, and a 3-cornered, small-brimmed hat. She kissed Verity and thanked her very affectionately, as if she thought the warmth of her hug would make up for all the deceit. Judd's presence was useful, for he knew the way to Falmouth, across country by narrow lane and mule track, and they touched no town or village where they might be recognized. Nothing in these hamlets passed unnoticed or unremarked. Every tinner and farm worker stopped in his work, hand on hips, to look over the ill-assorted couple. Judd ugly and whistling on his little shaggy pony, she young and handsome on her tall grey horse. Every cottage had its peering face. They lost the river among the trees and began sharply to pick their way down a dusty hill with cart ruts, and found themselves among cottages. Beyond the cottages was a great landlocked harbour and the masts of ships. Now her heart began to beat. The hazard of the day began. All her private imaginings in the quiet of the night were to come up against the hard and difficult truth. Her own view of Verity's lover, soft-spoken, handsome, middle-aged sailor, and the picture that Ross had raised by his description of the scene in Truro, these had to be reconciled and confronted with the truth before anything else was begun. After a few minutes they reached a cobbled square, and the water glittered like a silver plate between some houses of larger size. There was plenty of people in the streets, who seemed in no hurry to move aside for a couple of riders. Judd pushed his way through shouting and swearing. "What now?" said Judd, taking off his hat and scratching his head. "Ask someone," she said. "That's the proper way." "There's no one to ask," said Judd, staring round at the crowded square. 3 important-looking sailors with gold braid on their uniforms were passed before Demelza could decide. Judd sucked his 2 great teeth. She edged her horse past some urchins playing in the gutter, and closed up to 4 men who were talking together on the steps of one of the large houses, prosperous merchants, fat-stomached and bewigged. She knew that Judd should have done the asking, but could not trust his manners. At that moment Random chose to sidestep, and the clatter of his hoofs on the cobbles took their attention. "I beg your pardon for the interference," Demelza said in her best voice, "but could you please to direct me to the house of Captain Andrew Blamey?" They all pulled off their hats. Nothing quite like that had ever happened to Demelza before. They took her for a lady, and it made her blush. Once said, "Pardon me, ma'am, I didn't catch the name. Captain Andrew Blamey of the Lisbon packets." She caught an exchanged glance. "He lives at the end of town, ma'am. Down this street, ma'am. Perhaps 1/3 of a mile, but the packet agent would direct you if you called on him. He could also inform you if Captain Blamey's at home or at sea." "He's home," said another. "The Caroline's due to sail on Saturday forenoon." "I'm greatly obliged to 'ee," said Demelza. "Down this street, you said? Thank you. Good day." They bowed again. She touched her horse and went off. Judd, who had been listening with his mouth open, followed slowly, muttering about fine feathers. They trekked up a long narrow lane, mainly squalid huts and courtyards, with here and there a house or tiny shop, the land climbing steeply away among the trees and scrub to the right. The harbour held 2 or 3 dozen ships in an almost closed hand. She had seen nothing like it in her life, accustomed as she was to the sight of an occasional brig or cutter beating away from the land on the dangerous north coast. They were directed to one of the better houses, with a room built out over the front door to form a pillared porch. This was more imposing than she had expected. She got down stiffly and told Judd to hold her horse. Her habit was thick with dust, but she knew of no place to go and tidy herself. "I'll not be long," she said. "Don't go away, and don't get drunk, or I'll ride home without you." "Drunk?" said Judd, wiping his head. "No one has the call to leave that at my door. Many's the week as passes, and never a drop of liquor. Many's the time I ain't gotten the spittle for a fair good spit, that dry. And you says drunk, you says drunk. Why, I mind the time when you was tilly on account of finding a bottle of grog, and 'twas—" "Stay here," said Demelza, turning her back. "I'll not be gone long." She pulled at the bell. Judd was a spectre of old times, forgot him. Face this. What would Ross say if he could see her now?